Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. It's been a brilliant week of racing, and as always, I'm here to tell you all about it. This is the sports car focused episode for the week, so naturally, we are going to talk about all things sports car. It'll be a bit of a news heavy episode, but before we get into all of that, we have to talk about the conclusion of the Australian season, which more or less marks the end of the regular GT and sports car season, if you want to call it that. Now, first and foremost, if you have followed GT World Challenge Australia, you may notice that this looks very familiar like the results at the end of the last round, which is because even the official website of GT World Challenge Australia has not managed to update the standings, and it's now almost 48 hours after the final race. So a bit disappointing, but we are going to talk about it anyway. You'll just have to trust my word for who actually won. It should be pretty obvious though, because let's be real, the final round really was a contest between Shahin and Liam Talbot in the number 1 and the number 65 respectively. Geoff Emery just did not really have the pace to go with the other two in all of the rounds. All three races, it was a triple header this time around with 40-minute races as opposed to the usual 1-hour double header races that we know from GT World Challenge. And all three races had the same look, with Shahin and Liam Talbot battling at the front respectively, or in the race where the pro drivers started, it was Matt Campbell and not Max Hofer, Christian Mies going at it instead, but still a very similar look, although Max Hofer was able to stay a lot closer than Geoff Emery was in the 75, kind of obviously. So all three races look very similar. Shahin and Patterson turned out to be the stronger duo in, I want to say, actually just over the weekend. The only race that the number 65 won over the one was due to the pit stop penalty times, although obviously you can argue that that also aided the one in the third race in particular. But whatever, yeah, the one was the stronger car, but Talbot did more than enough to secure a comfortable title. The commentators have also been talking about him potentially going overseas for next year, which I think is very exciting. He's one of the very promising or just good to watch bronzes out there. Very fast, pretty consistent for a gentleman driver, and certainly would do well overseas as well, I reckon. So that was sort of my main takeaway from this GT World Challenge round. The other one obviously is the sad sort of end of the relationship between Mies and Audi. Obviously, he's leaving now at the end of the year. We don't know about Max Hofer, who I rate quite a bit. I feel like he's had a fantastic year driving for Audi, but we don't know if he's going to be staying or not. I think Audi have recently said they might be keeping some of their drivers. I don't know. It's just a very messy scenario that's going on over there. And I just hope everybody finds a good new home for next year. Okay, then next up we had the conclusion of the Supercar season. The title fight obviously wasn't particularly close, but it still found a rather quick ending, because at the beginning of race 1, Will Brown and Anton Di Pasquale collided, and sort of Shahin Gisberg did get caught up in that collision and got taken out on lap 1, which sort of just immediately ended the title fight. I think at that point, I don't even know if Kostecki had to finish at that point. So either way, that was slightly underwhelming, but Kostecki looked to have the pace anyway. He looked like a win contender early on. He was sort of like one of the two guys together with Reynolds battling for the lead in the first half. They couldn't quite keep it up until the end of the race, and eventually Randall and Waters came and passed them both, and Waters went on to win the race. But whatever, I think at that point for Brody, obviously it didn't matter anymore. Glad Reynolds did get to keep up his good form from last weekend, and he did so in the second race as well, as in general Grove Racing did, and that's why the big talking point from the second race is really Matt Payne actually getting his first win of his career, and also at the same time his first podium. So that was a massive step up. Obviously, a sign for good things to come, considering that was his rookie year. If he continues this going into next year, then we are going to have a pretty spicy battle of the youngsters, presumably with the likes of Payne and Feeney and everything. So even with Van Gisbergen leaving, the series is still in very good hands for the next couple of years, I reckon. In general, obviously, the season has been a bit controversial overall with the whole parity discussion and everything. Um, I hope next year can be a bit calmer again, a bit less off track drama and a bit more on track action instead. But I'd say overall it still delivered. We had quite a few very like hectic, eventful, chaotic, and fun to watch races. So I think it'll definitely be worth tuning in next year for the V8 Supercars. All right, now let's get into the meat of the episode, which is the massive news segment. And the main thing really is WEC. Obviously, today we got a provisional entry list, which we're going to look at the end of this. But we're sort of going to go through it in the order that happened over the week, which the first thing that happened was Alpine confirming its completed WEC lineup. Most of this was obviously quite predictable, but not all of it. And I think the big bombshell really is Ferdinand Habsburg joining the team. I didn't really see Paul Shahin coming, although technically it's like after it's been announced, it seemed somewhat obvious, but for some reason my brain did not jump to that. So to me, that came as a surprise. Mick Schumacher joining obviously has been rumored for a long time and is not really surprising. But overall, I think they have a very good mixture of experience and quick young guns with potential to improve. Obviously with Malaysia and also to a slightly less extent maybe Schumacher, like as the two young guns. 30 Habsburg somewhere in between, and then you have Vaxivier, Lapierre, and Shahin is like three very experienced pairs of hands that can just reliably carry a car over the race distance. So I'm very excited for this lineup. I was slightly worried that they were gonna try too hard to I don't know, go for a full French lineup or something like this, and not quite bring the punch required, I think, to do well at this stacked of a top class that Hypercar is going to be next year. So yeah, I'm really glad. I think this has a lot of potential. I'm in particular really happy for Ferdinand Habsburg because I thought he was gonna get left out. I was hoping maybe he could get in one of the BMW seats, but obviously we all know BMW just has so many factory drivers that there's just no space to bring in too many more WRT affiliated drivers. So yeah, I thought he was just gonna have to sit out WEC for a year and go down to ELMS. So yeah, I think this is a great turn of events. Now, more Hypercar news. This one now confirmed. This is from a day earlier where it was still more or less a rumor. Kubica tipped for third WEC Ferrari Hypercar, and yeah, it is actually happening. It is confirmed there will be a third AF Corsa operated Ferrari Hypercar on the grid, and Kubica is so far the only officially confirmed driver, although obviously there are the heavily rumored pair of drivers with Robert Schwarzman and Yiffy, which is a bit of a surprise, and we will talk about that when it's actually official, if it ends up being official. Kubica, obviously the man doesn't need any introduction. He also doesn't, everybody who's watched WEC in the last couple of years knows how good he is in a prototype as well. So yeah, this is just an easy decision to make really for Ferrari. I think this is a brilliant guy to build a Hypercar roster around, and then you partner him with some young guys, and I think you've got a really good recipe for a, I mean, title charge is a bit much, but you know what I mean, for a good fight at the sharp end of the grid if the car allows for it. Okay, then this one, again, higher up on the list of surprises. Kelvin van der Linde set to leave Audi. Well, he's already left Audi as a factory guy, I think even before this year. But it's been announced that he'll stay with Abt for the next for the 2024 DTM season. So he'll continue to drive an Audi in DTM. So naturally, I thought he was just gonna sort of continue what he did this year with driving Audis and the occasional uprun Lamborghini at special. I call them special events. I've done too much iRacing. You know what I mean? At the big endurance races and that sort of thing. But no, he's actually going to be a fully fledged Lexus factory driver running one of their two WEC entries. The other one obviously going to be Lopez. So this puts Lexus in a fantastic situation where they already have two great factory drivers locked down for their GT program. But also it means that Kelvin van der Linde, I believe for the first time ever, will actually step up to WEC. So again, just a great deal for both parties, I think. Nothing really to talk about. I know there's a few Kelvin van der Linde haters still out and about for that I mean, admittedly atrocious 2021 DTM final. But honestly, that bit aside, the guy is a fantastic racer. You can't take that away from him, and I'm just glad to see him on the biggest of sports car stages next year. This one really will only take a second because we've talked about it for weeks, and this is just it is now official. Marcello is actually joining BMW. Anybody who's been following the news a little bit saw this coming a mile off. Yeah, one of the best, or maybe the best sports car guy. Like, it's obviously a thing that you can't really call someone, I don't think, like with any degree of accuracy. But if I had to pick an absolute best sports car driver, it would be Marcello. So signing him, obviously a massive win for BMW, despite their already stacked factory roster. I think they are gonna make space for him, obviously. So whatever car will see Marcello behind the wheel next week will be one of the serious title contenders, provided BMW actually run their cars a bit better than they did this year. Okay, again, BMW related news, again surprising news, and this one makes me happy from an entirely different perspective, which is Walkenhorst switching its partnership. It's not going to be a BMW affiliated customer team anymore. It'll now be an Aston Martin customer team, and one of the big partnership teams for Aston Martin, one of the ones running I think they said GT World Challenge, or they are going to run a full pro backed entry somewhere, in the GT World Challenge Endurance. So that's fantastic. First of all, this means we are actually going to have, I believe it's already now 2 confirmed full factory Aston Martins in GT World Challenge Europe, which was massively missing this year. Very much looking forward to that. And then on the other side of that story, it's also a great deal for Walkenhorst, because they had been sort of, in the back seat a little bit. They were running the NLS effort for BMW, but that was about it this year, if I remember correctly. I don't think they've done any of the big events, really. And yeah, sure, they've done like Asian Le Mans series and these sorts of events, and they're running GT4 cars and everything, but they were never really featured in the big BMW factory attacks at any of the events, if you know what I mean. So it's good for the team. It's a step up for them from like sort of a tier 2 partner team, it felt like, at least, to back to the very top. And then also we will finally get to see more Aston Martin factory drivers, some of which I think will need to be announced very soon, because with all the cars they've announced, I think they are running out of drivers, if I'm not tripping entirely. So yeah, either way, we'll get to that when we'll get to that, I think. Okay. And then last but not least, we have the magnificent looking provisional entry list of the 2024 World Endurance Championship season. Now, once this is actually complete, as you can see, there is a bunch of to be confirmed drivers on there. Once this is actually complete and we're closer to the season, I'm going to do a proper preview video about the entire thing. So for this one, I just want to pick out a few like random talking points that really stood out. Obviously, we've already covered we've already covered the Alpines, we've already covered the third Ferrari entry, but there are a few others on here, and let's get to them now. So probably the biggest bombshell in terms of driver announcements by far, and one that I just cannot wrap my head around, is Alex Garcia announced as a driver for Isotta Fraschini, and I just don't know why. So for context, in case you weren't aware of his career, he is a former single-seater, or well, he has still competed in an active single-seater series or season this year, but he's done a dual program of F3 and ELMS, and to his credit, he's done quite well in prototypes so far. He's the reigning LMP3 champion in ELMS, and whenever he's been in one of those cars, he's really impressed all year long. I can't lie, it took me a tiny bit to figure out that they are actually not 2 different drivers with the same name, because you wouldn't recognize him if you've seen him in F3 and then see him make the jump to what he can do in an LMP3. Obviously, the level of competition is much lower, but there is still like other competent drivers running around in LMP3 and ELMS, and it just, yeah, Garcia is absolutely one of the top guys there. I was about to talk about him joining LMP2 next year for Asian Le Mans Series, and obviously I expected the same thing then for ELMS. That would have been a thing. I'm going to make an Asian Le Mans Series preview video on Friday, so stay tuned for that, and we're going to talk about his step up to LMP2 there, which I'm very much looking forward to. But I don't see why anybody in their right mind would promote him to a hypercar. Sure, money, obviously, it's racing, obviously it'll be about money, yeah, we all know this, but surely there must be a better source of income for that team as well, like a different driver to hire that can pay anyone who's not like a 19-year-old Silver with like mediocre potential, I'd say, based on all the things we've seen so far. Sure, maybe he is actually a great sports car driver. There are quite a few of them, obviously, that struggled on the single-seater ladder and then just clicked much better with the prototypes, and I hope he can be one of them, but shouldn't he still just have to prove that first in ELMS in an LMP2? I think that would be the correct way of doing things. So yeah, I don't know. This is very curious, but obviously as someone who was like low-key excited for this privateer entry and hoped that they would at least do better than Van Wall and Glickenhaus, yeah, not with this driver lineup, I'm afraid. It probably won't be happening. Okay. And then next up, we mainly have the GTD drivers really that stood out. Obviously, Rossi as one of the WRT guys was sort of a given. We knew this. Then it's a lot of returning drivers here, mostly is the ones announced. But the one we can talk about is the Menthai Purex Racing crossover project. I don't like that it's not running the number 911. We'll have to talk about this. But yeah, the number 92, I suppose it is then. And they are just straight bringing over Malikin, Sturm, and Bachler, which is their GT World Challenge. Obviously, the European Endurance. I think they won both. If I'm not, someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I think they won both the Sprint and the Endurance portion of the European GT World Challenge Bronze Cup this year. Bachler and Malikin, just a fantastic duo. He is consistently, I mean, he's not one of the top bronzes, and he might struggle a little bit in this, what's probably going to turn out to be a more competitive bronze field, I'd imagine. But he's still one of the better ones. Plus, then it's like the trio has the experience together. Sturm is a very, very solid Silver. Like, he is absolutely one of the faster Silvers then on this grid, I think. And then obviously Klaus Bachler doesn't need an introduction. So yeah, this team, I did not see this coming. Obviously it just wasn't really rumored or announced anywhere. So how would I see this coming? But yeah, I am really glad it's happening. Honestly, I think this is largely it in terms of things we need to talk about. The pro drivers have all been announced before, and I knew there was one more thing. Yeah, for United Autosports, for the McLaren entry, it'll be Gregory Saucy driving as the pro driver in one of the United Autosports McLarens. If you're not familiar with him, he's done a couple seasons of Formula 3 now. Bit mediocre there, but it's sort of a mixture between driver not quite good enough, car never quite good enough. Like, it's he's never had a championship winning car, let's put it that way. I don't think he's ever had a championship worthy season either, not even close really. So I don't know, he's a quality driver, much more promising than Garcia, at least in single seaters, for example. Also former European regional champion. So yeah, definitely a guy to look out for. He's never driven in sports cars as far as I know, so that'll be a bit of a change, and I'm excited to see how he does. Yeah, I think that's it for this week. As I said, on Friday, watch out for an Asian Le Mans Series preview, and otherwise we are going to be doing the Asian Le Mans Series review of the first round next week at the same time. And till then, take care, and I'll see you all. Bye-bye.